Hello, and welcome back to Super Hell, aka the Mysteries Podcast, a show where two recovering Supernatural fans subject themselves to a rewatch so no one else ever has to watch Supernatural again. My name is Ollie, I use any pronouns, and you can find me on social media at OllieFresh. That's fresh with a PH.
And my name is Klaudia, my pronouns are she, her, and you can find me on social media at Klaudia Says, K-A-L-U-D-I-A Says. We are recording this episode during Pride Month, so we do need to discuss something that Misha Collins did. That our viewers brought this to our attention. It happened a couple weeks ago, so it wasn't like during Pride Month, but we do need to bring it up, and we forgot to discuss it in our little Supernatural update.
Guys, I also want to say on the record, we talk about Misha Collins, and he'll probably say some other fuck-ass shit before we even release this episode, but I don't fuck with him.
We don't fuck with him.
I'm sorry. No, he is like, I swear to God, sometimes I'll just be like, okay, maybe Misha Collins is like normal or whatever. Maybe like I can get over it. And then, well, I never think he's normal, but I'm like, okay, whatever. Like he said something annoying, but it's like, we can move on. And then he'll say something worse. Like, so I'm like, what we're going to talk about today is not the worst thing that he said. But it was just, I really think that he needs to get a job so he can get off of Twitter and TikTok and Instagram comments. He needs to get out of his damn Instagram comments. I tell you that much.
He is out here saying the F slur at conventions. He didn't say it in a bad or derogatory way. Like, in context, like, it made sense. But, like, he's out here saying the F slur at conventions and absolutely whack shit about Palestine. And meanwhile, Jensen Ackles is employed.
Jensen Ackles booked and busy. No, it's so crazy. So for those of you who don't know, the thing that I'm talking about is not the thing that we are going to talk about really on the podcast. But one thing was that it was like, so Misha Collins has been online basically being like, oh my gosh, like, Israel has a right to defend their borders. And, like, obviously what's happening in Palestine is sad, but, like, Israel has a right to defend itself. And someone in the comments, and I won't say their name just because they're, like, a regular person and I don't want to, like, blow up their spot, but they said, quick question at Misha. Which borders are it that Israel has a right to defend? Because all that land they have used to be full of Palestinians until Israel drove them out and stole the land. And Misha Collins replies, I live on what was once Chumash land. All of the USA and Canada is on land that belonged to indigenous people. Should these countries also not exist?
Uh-oh. Misha.
Hey, Misha. Like, we all know that's stupid, right? The point is that he's saying stuff like that and very clearly obfuscating the fact that there is an active genocide with even if it had not reached the point of genocide, Israel has no right to be engaging in armed combat there. There's no land for them to defend because it was all Palestinian land that was given away without Palestinians' consent and without any sort of actual, like, you know, legality to it. So that's the point. So that's why I'm mad at Misha right now. So just so you know that we're going to make fun of him for what he did, that we're going to talk about that's a little bit funnier, but know that this is where the vitriol comes from.
It's like... And I know that on this show we go so back and forth between, oh my god, Castiel, and then Misha Collins if I see you in the street. Like, it's so... I hope that you can hold that cognitive dissonance with us.
And also, just, you know, we are, Klaudia has a family that we are currently raising money for so that they can evacuate Gaza and they can, you know, find safety and security. So that's going to be in our show notes. So if you would like to take a look at that, we would really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. So that's been our update on what the fuck is going on with Supernatural. There shouldn't be anything happening with Supernatural. I have to emphasize this. I don't know why there are still things happening with this dumb show that is still on. And yet we beat on boats against the current.
Yeah, and I will also say, I think that a lot of people's activism comes from celebrity culture. Yeah. And I think a lot of people think their activism can start and stop at what celebrities they support. And I think that there is something to be said about, like, as consumers and as people who have such little power in society as we have made the working class, there is something to be said about, like, well, if the only power that you have is your buying power and your consumption, like your power of consumption, then it's kind of like, well, you know, who you choose to support and who you uplift does matter. I'm not thinking about this as being like, oh my God, like, the activist, like, we need to point out when Misha Collins does something wrong and my activism can start and end there. Like, that's not what this is. No. It's just something that I feel like I have to say.
This is
because fuck him, for real.
This is because we are a Supernatural podcast and we must make it clear. I've got other shit to say.
Oh yeah, so now the fun thing, Misha Collins said the F slur at a convention.
And the funny thing is like, in context, it's not actually that bad. Like, it kind of, like, I guess makes sense or whatever, but it was just like, much as I was like, well, you need to come back out of the closet, King.
So Misha Collins was at a convention, and he was basically like, yeah, like, gay rights have, like, come so far, and, like, back in my day, people used to say all these, like, words and used to say mean things about gay men, and they used to say, he hesitates, says the F slur, then continues on being like, yeah, but we're in such a better place now. And you're like, and everyone in the audience was like, one of the reason that I found out about it, because I found out about it was because I saw a tweet that said, at least he hesitated first.
I just, honestly,
like, sir, you need to get a grip, like, for real.
If you told me in the year, like, 2014 that Misha Collins would say the F slur at a convention and Destiel was canon, I'd be like, you live in it. And now I'm just like, yeah, that seems about right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just your average Tuesday.
I mean, you know what? For what Supernatural has done for the Omegaverse, I'll give him the card. I'll give him the pass. Actually, that actually has nothing to do with him, actually, because it's mostly J2. But, like,
yeah,
Jared can say it.
Can someone write a letter to Jared Padalecki right now and just like can we reach out to his lawyers or something and say, here, we're giving you one official pass to say the F slur from this show, and we're gay. Don't worry, guys. In case you didn't know, listening to the show, we are gay. So
big news,
you know, big news. So this is not us. This is not two straighties deciding that it's okay.
On our TikTok, I just realized apparently there are a lot of straight people who like Supernatural. I knew that there were a lot of straight people who like Supernatural. I thought that it was like, it started with like the audience that they wanted of like mainstream dudes, middle America, and then it kind of dwindled until the CW only got good ratings when they put Castiel on screen. Like, and then they put it on Netflix and it was like every teenage queer in an 18-mile radius. What I didn't know was that
in an 18-mile radius.
I don't know why I said 18 mile. I don't know why I said that. I don't know where that came from. But what I didn't know was that it like continued to have a very large straight male audience, to the point where I reached Supernatural power scaling TikTok, where they were talking about like, who could Dean Solo in the verse, and and then everybody in the comments when I stitched it was like, yeah, like, guys in the army really like it, or people were like, my dad likes it, or my grandpa, and then people were like, actually, old guys in their 60s in Argentina like it, and I'm like, I didn't know about this, and I was like, and then I thought about it, and like, and there were also people putting this out in the comments, and I was like, there's people who are lifelong fans of, like, they don't even know the Omega, like, they don't know the impact, they don't know the deep texts, they're engaging with this, and they don't know the other half.
This is sometimes how I feel when I see people who are younger or new to the Supernatural fandom talk, and it's like, no beef towards them. I'm never going to be the kind of person who says, oh, you got into something late in the game, you're not a real fan. Absolutely not. I would never say that. But sometimes I think about the mindset you have to be in watching Supernatural when you've never heard of Twist and Shout.
Like, and not only never heard of it, but like, you weren't there, like, when it was a thing. Like, you weren't there for November 5th, 2020. Like, you, like, what's in the mindset of somebody who's like, I'm going to decide to watch Supernatural now? Like, I know we made this.
God bless you.
We made this show to prevent you from doing that. So if you are one of those people, stop now. Turn back. Also, on the power scaling discussion, I just want to say this right here. I said in the TikTok, I was like, the Winchesters could beat Sukuna. And everyone was like, where's the essay? And all I'm going to say is this. A lot of people were saying that Dean Winchester is a lot like Batman, where with enough preparation, he could beat anyone. I agree. I think he could. They've beaten God. They've beaten a lot of other people. I do believe that they could beat Sukuna. Because it is canon in JJK that, like, well, what if you just pulled out a gun? Is a big deal. I think if they had the Colt, they could one-shot Sukuna, and I think that's very funny. To me.
I'm not gonna lie. I don't really know who that is, but I'm obsessed with the fact that we're having the conversation. I think it's something that needed to be said. But also, there is a situation that has to do with power scaling that we will talk about later in this episode. Because I remember watching this and being like, this does not feel like a fair fight. But I won't spoil what it was.
I'm trying to think, what was it?
You'll know. Oh, trust me, I will make a stink about it.
Okay. Anyways, in case you missed it, we are in season 4 of Supernatural, aka one of the last times the Supernatural is good. These 2 episodes, we had like a two-parter last time that was very overall plot driven. This time around, we're back to kind of Monster of the Week. But in its peak era of Supernatural, where it tricks you into being a good show, this is where it's mixing in the, like, themes that they're trying to struggle with and the overall plot really well. So it's going to tie back to the overall plot. It's just that these are more Monster of the Week, and we get into some more ridiculous things.
This was back when, like, Supernatural, like, I always hesitate to call things filler, especially in, like, Western television, because I think people forget what filler episodes actually are, because stop me if I'm incorrect, but one of the big things that, like, the foundation of filler episodes was in anime, when you have a manga that the anime is based on, and the manga's not caught up to where the anime is, so the anime has to start
filling shit in.
Like, just making stuff up, basically. Like, that's where you get your, like, fluffy character episodes, your beach episodes, all that kind of stuff. So, and I think it's, like, there is something to be said about, like, oh, filler exists to not be plot-driven. But when you have something that has, like, a planned arc or a planned point A to point B, it's kind of hard to call anything filler. Yeah. Like, it's hard to call it filler unless they literally don't know they literally don't know what they're doing, so they're doing something that's, like, completely random.
I will say, I think one of Supernatural's strengths is that even in the most filler of episodes, like, they'll tie it back in a way of, like, this is a character building episode. This is a moment that is a random thing that they're doing, but it's causing one of them to reflect. And then you have the episode where Dean thinks he's a dog, you know?
No, because it's so fucked up, because I was literally, when I was talking about how Supernatural filler episodes are good, I was fucking thinking about Dog Dean Afternoon, genuinely one of the worst episodes of the show, emblematic of all of its problems. Guys, I don't think you guys understand the actual physical hatred I have for that episode of this show.
We'll get to it.
It's not until, is it season 9? I think it's season 9. I'm pretty sure. It's 9 or 10. I'm pretty sure it's season 9. But I remember watching it and being like, everyone who worked on this episode,
are you good?
I will be doing something drastic. That's a joke. I understand there's a lot of people that work on stuff. If you did the costuming for that episode, God bless you.
It ain't your fault.
If you were the animal handler, God bless you.
Lord, and we talked about this, I think, when we talked about the Lost Jumanji episode, but like, oh, so you did Dog Dean Afternoon, but not the Lost Jumanji episode? Like, anyways, we're getting off course.
Such a god-awful episode.
We also haven't had one of these in a while, which is an episode where the monster might not be a monster. Maybe the monster...
It might not be what you expect.
Yeah, maybe the monster was humanity all along. I love when Dean talks about that in an episode, because it's very, like, society. Much to think about. Anyway.
Yeah, that's because Dean's woke. Oh, we can't have monster anymore because of woke.
Because of woke. Oh, if we could start doing those jokes, we'll never stop.
That might be the episode title. We can't have monster anymore because of woke.
So this episode, season 4, episode 11, is called Family Remains. Just as a brief thing, content warning for this episode, there's discussions of suicide, incest and sexual assault, and like child abuse. So it's not like a law, but it's a bit jarring. So just wanted to let you guys know. It opens with your traditional Supernatural cold open. There is I will also noticed this episode had a lot of scenes where it was just so fucking dark I couldn't see, and I was like, oh, so...
Oh my God,
like,
yeah.
this has to be the start of that in television. It begins now.
I watched this at a cafe on my laptop, and I was watching it in, like, the middle of the day, so, like, between, like noon and, like, 1:32-ish, and yes, it took me a long time because I took fucking notes, but I was sitting there watching this being like, what the hell is going on? Like, what is happening? I literally could not see. There's a scene where someone, like, gets attacked, and I'm sitting there watching this fight like, so who is that?
Yeah, it was giving Game of Thrones at one point, and I do think some of it was on purpose, but some of it definitely wasn't. So, like, the great thing about watching Supernatural is you get to watch how TV and cinema changed over time, and this is one of them.
Oh yeah.
I wonder when they switched, because Supernatural's been on long enough that they used to be on film and then switched to digital. I don't know what season that was, but that's just a fun fact. So we open with, there's this older guy, he's drinking, he's watching TV, and okay, Ollie's note here is, sees a girl who is all fucked up. Okay.
Yeah, so I just want to add, usually the way that we do our episodes is that we do most of it by memory, but we will, like, sample from the Supernatural wiki. But recently, and this is no beef to the wiki because it has a very different purpose than us, and again, usually we just use it for the sake of, like, remembering and recalling. But I got really frustrated because I'm like, the wiki kind of gives the important parts, but doesn't get a lot of the plot beats.
Yeah.
Or it gets the plot beats, but it doesn't get some of the finer details.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to take my own notes, and we're not even going to use the wiki except for maybe some fun facts if they're there. But I took these notes, I sat down, and it felt like a court stenographer. I felt like I was, like, doing the most important job in the entire world. I felt I was typing like 1,000,000 words a minute.
Why do you write like you're running out of time? Anyways, so this...
No. You can't make a Hamilton reference and then try to anyways your way out of it.
I say on my Supernatural podcast.
You know what? Fair enough. Never mind. I'm gonna sit my white ass down and listen.
There's this guy, he's like watching TV, he's drinking, he's kind of out of it, and he sees this fucked up girl who looks like she's straight from The Ring, who shows up, and wait, do we see her actually kill him or no? Or we just see the blood? We see the blood like splatter on the wall. She kills him, and he's like, "What the fuck?" and then kills him. And it's like Supernatural. We cut to a very weird sight of the Impala parked somewhere at the middle of the night. Clearly, they have not gotten to a motel. They have just finished a job 2 hours ago. Sam is snoozing. Dean is already, like, looking at maps. He's looking for a new job, whatever. And Sam is like, girl, what the fuck? Like, Sam's like, didn't we, like, just finish a job? Like, chill out. And Dean and Sam is, like, fucking exhausted. And Dean is... Now, mind you, context here is at the end of the last episode, if you remember, Dean finally told Sam what the fuck happened in hell, aka he was forced to torture people, and it was pretty bad. And that's how you become a demon. But it is clear that Dean is he's still shaken by it, and also shaken by having to talk about it, and he's clearly running from his problems by, like, making them do a million things. And Sam is like, girl, what the fuck? So...
Yeah, Sam does have a moment where he's like, Dean, I know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And Dean's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And Sam's like, you're trying to work, you're trying to focus so much on this, like, you can't outrun this, you can't run forever. And Dean's like, well, from what? What are you talking about? And he's like, you can't run away from what you told me about hell.
Yeah.
Like, it happened, and, like, you just need to learn to deal with it and, like, you know, cope. Basically.
I'm like, all right, Sam, well, you didn't go to hell, so pack it up. No. Basically, they find a case in Nebraska where the man, we find out, who died at the beginning, was named Bill Gibson, was found murdered in his room, and it was locked from the inside. So they're like, all right, let's go. they show up at this house. I think it's implied that they're pretending to be the real estate agents because they have the keys to this house. They show up to this empty house. It's in like a field. It's like a farmhouse. And they go in and the house is empty. So clearly it's already been cleaned out. It's being sold. And they're like, Dean makes some fuck ass comment where they're like, oh yeah, like, you know, he makes some comment about like, oh yeah, you know, 2 beds, 2 baths, and someone killed themselves here, you know, what a steal. And I'm like, all right, damn, pack it up. What is this, 2008? The housing crisis is an issue. Give them a rest. Like,
I would have loved to see the cost of this house.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to see how much this house was on the market for, because it's like a pretty nice, like, I mean, it's kind of a shitty house, but like, all things considered, the bones are good.
Yeah, like it's...
So I'm like, I feel like if you tried to sell that house now, it would be like, I mean, I guess it's in Nebraska, but it would be like at least $700,000.
Yeah.
Like, easily.
So they start looking around the house. They go in the kitchen and they see, like, painted over on the wall is, like, they're knocking on the wall and they're seeing, like, oh, I think that it's hollow here. And Sam is like, oh, like, they probably had a dumbwaiter if it's an older house. And Dean's like, all right, nerd. How would you know that? And I'm like, damn, some people just know history, Dean. Calm the fuck down. Jesus. They're still looking around the house. They open a closet and they find a doll head. And it's literally the doll head from, like, that one freaky doll from Toy Story 2. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know. Sid's.
Yeah.
Is that Toy Story 2? I thought that was the first one.
No, that's Toy Story 2.
No, babes. Toy Story 2 is the one with the collector.
No.
Yeah, it is. Sid is in Toy Story 1.
Oh, damn. I don't know. I don't know my Toy Story
You're
lore.
Disney adulting. You're not very Disney adulting right now.
I know. Yeah, it has the fucking head of the weird, like, with the pins in the head. It's fucked up. And they're just like, ugh, what the fuck is that? A key to this is also, usually when they go scope out a house, they do, like, the EMF meter, and they're like, oh, it's, like, going off the charts, and they look out the window, and they're like, oh, we're right next to the power line, so it's not going to help. So they don't have a traditional way of detecting if there's, like, ghosts here or something. So anyway, they're looking around the house, and suddenly, they look out the window, and there's a moving truck pulling into the driveway. Now, granted, this house is, like, next to a fucking cornfield, okay? And they're like, oh, Dean's like, Sam, wasn't this supposed to be, like, not sold yet? It was supposed to be on the market. And he's like, well, evidently I was wrong. And they're like, fuck. So they go to try and sneak out of the house. And this family pulls up. They get out of the car. There's a mom, there's a dad, there's 2 kids, and then there's the brother of the mom. And a dog. I forgot about the dog. And they have, like, the big moving truck, and then they have, like, their car or whatever. And, like, the daughter is like, oh my god, you meet us in the middle of fucking nowhere. The dad and the mom are very, like, you know, okay, like, I hope this is the right choice, blah, blah, blah. The son seems
very, very, like, horror movie, like,
yeah,
we just needed a fresh start kind of deal.
I think they literally say that. Like, the dad is, like, super cheesy, whatever.
Yeah, there's a part where the daughter's like, is there even any service out here? And he's like, well, we checked and we decided to bring you out here anyway.
I love how they play with the horror movie cliches there. Because it's a bit of a misdirect, which I love. I think is Booth's behavior. So they're ready to go in, and then the girl.
Oh, and there's a son as well. So there's
yeah.
I know you said that there was a son, but I think I kind of interrupted you. But there's a son, and that son, I immediately was like, this son is maybe like, what, like 8 or 9, maybe a little younger. And I immediately was like, that's a dude from 13 Reasons Why. It's Dylan Minette from 13 Reasons Why.
Suddenly, the girl turns around, and she sees Sam and Dean walking out of the house. They are not subtle at all. And she's like, who the fuck are those guys? I mean, she doesn't say who the fuck, but she's like, who are these guys? They all go up to Dean and Sam, they're not, like, in one of their fake outfits or whatever. And they're like, who are you? And Sam and Dean, they pretend to be, like, the city commissioner or something. And they're like, hey, The house is being condemned. You need to stay in a motel. Well, actually, I don't know if they said it was condemned. I think they said that there was asbestos. And they're like...
Oh, there was asbestos and a gas leak.
They're literally just making shit up. And I'm like, you guys didn't have anything prepared. Like, are you dumb? And the family...
Like, you had time waiting inside before they came in.
Yeah, the family is not... Like, the family is not believing them. And they're like, please, like, just whatever. And like they really don't want to, and they're like, you just need to stay in a home motel, whatever. And the dad is like, he turns to his family and he's like, we'll figure it out, just give me one night, whatever. And they're like, ugh. So we cut to Sam and Dean. They're in their dumb little suits, and they have shown up at like a trailer park, at a trailer. They have found a neighbor of the man who previously lived in the house. His name is Bill Gibson. And she used to clean for him like every week or something. And they're like, hey, so like, and she was also the one who found him. And they're like, hey, like, what did it look like, whatever. And she was like, well, I found him dead and splattered everywhere. And they're like, oh. And they're like, can you tell us more about him? Did he have any enemies? Did he, like, what was he like? You must have known him a while. You knew him for like 5 years, whatever. And she was like, well, he was kind of freaky, and he was kind of sad and kind of lame. And they're like, why? And she's like, well, it's kind of understandable. His wife died in childbirth, and then 20 years later, his daughter killed herself. And they're like, oh, well, interesting.
Yeah, it makes sense why he'd be a little bit upset.
Yeah. And then and they're like, do you know like where they're buried? And she's like, no, they were both cremated. The mother and the daughter. The guy, actually, interestingly enough, they don't say. And they're like, did you notice anything weird when you were there, whatever? And she's like, I did sometimes notice, like, rattling in the walls. And they're like, yeah, rats have got to be a problem, like, out in the fields. And she's like, I never saw any rats. And they're like, okay. So it's, assumedly, I don't know, it's not the next day. I think they just, like, waited until Sam and Dean left. The family has come back to move in. The uncle walks out and is like, I think they were fucking with us. He's like,
this is, okay, I have to say, this uncle walks out and he's like, there's no gas leak and there's no asbestos. I can tell, like, I've built enough houses, so clearly he's like a contractor or a builder or something.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm ignorant and I don't know enough about building houses. Can you tell that there's no asbestos or a gas leak without any tools? Dude just walks in.
I feel like you can see it. It's kind of
a gas leak.
It's kind of a large house. I mean, a gas leak you could smell, right?
But what if it's not that? Some gas leaks you can't smell.
I don't know.
Carbon monoxide.
I don't know. Nothing in the show makes sense. But they're like, all right, let's move on in. And the daughter is standing outside, and she looks in the window and sees the same fucked up girl that we saw in the first scene before good old Bill died, and she's like, what the hell? And she's like, oh, and she's like freaked out by it. And her mom's like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, it's fine. And she says, they keep saying these like very cheesy lines. And like, I think at one point she's like, yeah, it seems like everything's going to change. And you're like, it's very.
Yeah. I think the mom says like to her, she's like, hey, like, it's gonna be all right. Like, I know that this is weird and, like, the house is weird, but this is gonna be good for us. And she's like, yeah, well, everything's gonna change. And it's like, she kind of says it in, like, a almost, like, it's a really interesting line delivery. Because she did give it, like, I think it's kind of implied that there's, like, some not confusion, but, like, some mixed emotions going on.
Yeah,
and it is very reflective in that.
Which we find out later, kind of why that is. We cut to the younger son, Danny. He's playing video games. I think he's playing a Game Boy Advance, Game Boy SP. Shout out to him. And he a baseball gets thrown at him in this dark room. Like, his mom is calling for him. He's like, okay, you better be unpacked, whatever. He's clearly ignoring her. He's playing video games, and a baseball is thrown at him from the closet. And he's like, huh? And instead of being freaked out by this, shout out to him. He's like, hey, like, who is that? And he starts playing catch with whatever is in the closet. And starts making friends with it and talking to it. And you're like, girl, what the fuck? I love how just unbothered he is by this. And then it cuts to
it was at this point that I was like, wait a minute. That's a kid from 13 Reasons Why.
It cuts to downstairs. The mom is like reading about growing things on a farm. She's clearly struggling. And she's like, what are we doing? And the husband is like, you know, we're going to figure it out. We're going to have to, whatever. And they're having a real like serious conversation about this. And she says, he's like, everything's going to change. And the mom is like, are you sure? Like, I can't put the kids through another year like last year. And you're like, girl, what the fuck has happened? I think they walk out of the kitchen or whatever, and they see written on the wall is just the word go in like large like red crayon. And they're like, oh my God, like, is this a prank from Danny, the kid? Like, what's going on?
Oh, I think the uncle finds it, like, he's walking in to meet them.
Yeah.
And then it's like, hey guys, you might want to come see this.
I'm like, what the fuck?
And then the uncle makes a comment, because they're like, oh, it's probably Danny. And he goes like, well, you know what I would do if it was my kid? And Susan, the wife, is like, well, it's not your kid, so shut the hell up. So it's kind of like, she doesn't say it exactly like that, but she's basically like, well, he's not your kid, so don't worry about it. So it kind of implies he's a bit of a shithead.
Yeah, you're like, damn. They assume it was Danny, and Danny comes down, and they're like, did you do this? And the dad's like, if you did this, like, I won't reprimand you, just like tell me why, whatever. And Danny's like, no, I didn't do this. Like, the girl in the walls did this. And they're like, and like, she hates grown-ups. And, you know, if he's like, you know, she wants all of you to leave and for me to stay. And they're like, come on, like, we know that you're like, we know that you're screwing with us. Like, just tell us the truth. He's like, no. And then he says, if Andy were here, he'd believe me. And you're like, who's Andy? Then we cut to the daughter. She's in bed.
The worst scene in the entire episode.
Oh, it is.
This is like, it's like, we've all heard this story before, though. Like, this little this like campfire horror story. I was like, okay, trope.
Yeah. Also, thinking about it in the context of like what ends up happening and like what the real mystery is, I'm like, what was this supposed to be?
Yeah, I don't.
So
gross.
Yeah. So she's sitting in bed. And she's talking to the dog, and like, you can hear that like the dog is like licking her hand. And she's like, oh, I can't believe we moved here, blah, 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 this is terrible, whatever. And then she's talking to the dog, whatever, and then we see the door open, and the dog walks in. And so she's like, and then the door to her room slams shut, that like something just left. She's like, oh, what the fuck was licking my hand? She starts screaming. She goes downstairs. She's like, I just got molested by Casper the pervy ghost.
Which, imagine saying that. Who wrote this episode? Can we check real quick?
Jeremy Carver.
Of course it was fucking Jeremy Carver. Always. Imagine this happening to you and that being your response. Like, that being how you phrase it.
Like, it's so...
Network television, they just don't do it like they used to.
It's so... And then immediately, her brother's like, oh, it must have been the girl in the walls. And their parents are like, girl, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Suddenly...
This episode is so, like, this family is having, like, maybe the second worst night of their lives.
It's... Suddenly, Sam and Dean show up and burst into their fucking house. And they're like, guys, there's a ghost. And their dad is like, did you do this? Did you molest my daughter? And Dean's like, ew, no. And you're just like, well, I mean, you did just burst into their house. Like, and imagine that these two guys just, like, showed up. Like, they just showed up, and you saw them in your fucking house before. They do a lot of things in this episode where you're like, and why would they not suspect you? And
we soon find out why.
Yeah, and Sam and Dean, when they were, like, out, like, scoping the house, they were like, do we tell them? Like, how do we get them out of there? Like, what do we do? And they're like, I don't know. Well, that problem is solved for them because they enter the house, and then the horrors begin. So they're, like, trying to, like, calm everybody down. And then the lights go out. And they hear the dog, Buster, crying outside. And they're like, oh my God, everyone's freaking out. Like, the girl is, like, hyperventilating, whatever. They run outside. Sam and Dean, and I think the dad and the uncle, I want to say, they see this trail of blood and fur. And they're like, oh my God. And then the mom and the two kids come out and they're like, stay inside. Like, don't look at this. And they run out and they see a trail of blood and the words "too late" written on, I think it's on the moving truck, actually. Also, I just want to say, knowing what we know about this later, how do we know that this bitch can write?
I was also thinking that maybe that's the 3 words they can spell are go and too late.
Yeah. I just want to know. Or speak. I mean, speak, I guess they heard other people speak. Like, I just want to know, like, anyways. So they're like, okay. They're saying to the dad and the uncle, they're like, you need to get your family out of here. You need to leave. And, like, they're like, okay, we'll go to a hotel, whatever. And they're saying, they're like, you're clearly being haunted. Like, we need to go. And they're like, they, like, don't believe Sam and Dean. They're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, you showed up at my house, whatever. But now they're like, okay, I'm still a little freaked out. So,
things are getting a little kooky.
They all run to the car. The tires are slashed. And then Sam and Dean go to the Impala. Their tires are slashed. And all the weapons in their trunk are gone. It's bad. And then the girl is looking out into the woods and she sees the fat fucking girl again. And she's like, oh my God. And she starts screaming. The uncle is like, we gotta go. And they're like, where are we gonna go? So they're like, okay, we need to, like, batten down the hatches. We're being hunted.
Yeah.
So.
And Sam and Dean are also, like, weirded out because usually when there's, like, because they had assumed too, like, okay, so the ghost is probably just, like, attacked because she got cremated. The ghost is probably either the mother or the daughter, and they're attached to something that's in the house because they both got cremated, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's gotta be something like that.
So then when they see her outside, they're like, huh!
Yeah. They're like, that's not where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. So they go inside, and like, I guess, I don't know why they decide to do this. And they're like, all right, we're gonna get in a circle of salt. We're gonna do this and that. And when they do the circle of salt, the Uncle Ted is so... Oh, wait, no, this happens later. Never mind.
Oh, yeah, but the uncle is, like,
he's
so
kind of being a shithead.
Hateful.
They're getting inside. They're making, like, a circle of salt, whatever. And the kid is like, hey, if you guys hunt ghosts, like, are you guys like Scooby-Doo? And Dean is like, better. Knowing that there's a Scooby-Doo Supernatural episode later.
No. Also, the uncle's kind of giving them shit about it, and he's like, we should not be, like, waiting here, we should leave. Like, we need to go. I'm not gonna be scared away by some hillbilly who's playing a prank on us.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, well, it's a fucking ghost, so jot that down.
Yeah. So Sam takes out a picture after they're like, okay, like, you guys are the real deal. Like, Sam takes out a picture and he shows it to the daughter and he's like, is this, which is the picture of the daughter who killed herself, is this her? And she's like, yeah, except for she was, like, paler and she was really dirty. And they're like, okay, well, she killed herself inside this house. So even if she was cremated, like Ollie said, she must have been connected to something in the house. And this is also a point where I'm like, is there not a landline phone in this house, I guess by 2000.
Or did they have a cell phone?
Well, they had a cell phone and they said there's no signal. We already established that
never mind.
before.
Sorry.
Which I'm like, okay. I'm like, okay, like in a country house like that, is there no landline? Like, okay. So the uncle is like freaking out. He wants to leave, whatever. And Dean's like, it's okay. I have a gun. Problem is, Dean doesn't have a gun because they took all of their weapons.
Oh, see, Dean was not like that. Dean was like, the guy was like, I'm going to leave. I'm not going to let some hillbilly mess with us. And Dean goes, you are not going to leave. I have a gun. And I will put a third hole in you if you try to leave. Like, he's like, I'm going to shoot you. And Sam was like, oh my God, like, that was... Okay, yeah. And then Sam pulls him aside and he's like, so you actually, like, don't have a gun? And he's like, yeah, I know that, but they don't have to know that. I can't let anyone else leave and, like, die.
It's like, even that asshole doesn't deserve to die. Like, and you're like, all right.
Yeah, because Dean, you can tell that he's like, oh, like, I have to save
like, people to atone for my shit.
Exactly.
Dean is kind of going through it right now more than usual. Yeah.
But he's like, because he's like, if they leave, if like the uncle leaves right now and he dies, I'm gonna, it's like,
yeah,
like it will be our fault. And Sam's like, okay, all right, I understand your game.
And at this point, they're inside the circle, and Ted, the uncle, is like, oh, does the circle of salt have to be kosher? And the mom's like, girl, shut the fuck up. And then suddenly they see a door open and a pale hand come out. Granted, just remember, this is not how we normally see ghosts. They usually just whoosh onto the scene. But she comes in and like, she's like creeping inside. You see like her hand first, whatever. And it's the girl, and she's wearing ratty clothes, and she has a knife, and they're like, it's okay, like she can't get past the circle, whatever. And she walks up to the circle and walks right past it, and they're like, oh shit. And the daughter is like, you know, how could she walk past the circle? And then Sam and Dean are like, okay, Fox, okay, so she's not a ghost.
Dean is like that because Sam isn't there.
Oh yeah,
Sam is upstairs looking through the attic.
Yeah, sorry. And then she starts screaming and like fighting Dean with a knife. And then she like runs into a closet and disappears. And then they can't find her. And then when they try to look for her. And so Sam and Dean are like, so she's not a ghost. And they all run outside. And I think at this point is when Sam and Dean have a slight conversation where they're like, okay, so she's human. And they're like, yeah, what's all this about?
And I think the uncle's like, yeah, I freaking said she was human.
You said she was some fuck ass. Like,
I said she was some fuck ass, and Dean is like, okay, you did. Do you want to medal? Like, what?
Do you want to invite Bella Hadid?
Should we throw a party? Should we invite Bella Hadid?
And at this point, I think is when Dean is also like, humans, am I right? And you're like, girl, like, this is very much a society. And they gather outside, and Sam is like, okay, I didn't find anything in the attic except for the girl, Rebecca's diary. The daughter who killed herself. Then they convene outside, and they're like, okay, you guys go into the shed, and, you know, we the men will look around. And they're like, wait, where's Danny? Where's the boy? And they're like, and the mom starts like freaking out. She's like, I'm not going to go without him, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, they have to like calm her down and be like, we will find her. Clearly he's gone. And then I think at this point, the daughter is like,
we will find him. The boy.
So the mother and the daughter go and hide in the shed. Sexism wins. And Sam and the dad decide to look outside and then like guard the shed, basically. And then Dean and the uncle decide to look inside the house. At this point, this is where they find a hole in the wall covered with blood, and they're like, oh my God. And they go into the wall, and I'll just be real. It's giving We Don't Talk About Bruno. It's literally...
Stop! It is! No, it is! Like, this is like an evil, fucked up version of Encanto.
It is an evil, fucked up version of Encanto. It's literally it's in the walls. It's in the goddamn walls. Like, there's all these, like, little...
When I say I'm in your walls, this is what I mean.
That's literally what is happening. So they're, like, trying to, like, move along in there, and then there's just this fucking hole in the floor. And the uncle's like, you're not gonna go in there. And Dean's like, unfortunately, I have to.
And the whole time he goes in the hole, he's like, please don't let anything grab my leg. Please don't let anything grab my leg. Please don't let anything grab my leg.
I'm like, you fight demons for a living, hon. He's like, I love how, like, he's been to hell, but he's like, I hope nothing grabs my leg.
He is so real.
You know what? Like, I would say the same thing. He gets down there and he sees a bunch of dead animals, including the family dog. And he's like, well, I guess I've...
Rest in peace, Buster.
No, literally.
Justice for Buster.
And he's like, I think I found her kitchen. And he's looking around. Like, he gets jump scared by a dead rat hanging from the ceiling. He's like, oh! And he's like, oh, okay. It's really funny. He's walking...
It's very reminiscent of when in Yellow Fever, when he was like, that was scary! And he got scared by a cat jumping out of a locker.
Yeah. He's searching down there, and then suddenly the uncle, like, gets up from looking down there, turns around, and the girl is behind him and just stabs him. And suddenly he falls face first. His dead body falls face first into the hole, and Dean sees it and is like, oh my god. And then he's like, he covers his, like, flashlight, and he's like, oh shit, like, she's up there. And so he's like, now I'm fucking trapped down here, and he's dead. Oh my god. So this is the slasher episode of Supernatural. I don't know how Dean gets out, to be honest.
I think she leaves. Like, he just has to wait for her to pass by.
Yeah, and he has to, like, move the body and get out, which I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
It cuts back to the shed, and Dean returns and has to tell them the uncle has been killed. And you can tell that this has really gotten to him. And Dean he's like, I left him alone. I blame myself, whatever. And the wife is crying and rocking back and forth. She's like, this cannot be happening. Like, and she's like, this means that our son, Danny, the boy, is probably dead. Why is this happening to us? We're good people. We're a good family. And the dad goes to her and is like, you know, what happened to Andy is not your fault. We are going to find Danny, and then we're going to be fine. And you're like, who is this Andy character that we keep referencing? And I think I want to say at this point is when the daughter is like, well, I don't think the kid is dead, because if you remember what he said was that the girl liked him and wanted him to stay and all the adults to leave. So, like, they're holding on to that, but the mom is convinced that he's dead. She's lost it. We cut to Sam and Dean. They're outside. Sam is like, okay, I'm going to read this diary. And Dean is talking to the dad. And he's like, hey, was Andy your son? And the dad's like, yeah, he was our oldest. He died in a car accident last year. That's why we're here. It nearly tore my marriage apart. A part of moving here, this was supposed to be our fresh start when we talked to our, like, marriage counselor, whatever, like, and Dean is really, one thing I thought about in this scene, I was like, Dean seeing how this family was torn apart by a death in the family, and a dad who was trying when John never did that for him.
If John Winchester had one session with a grief counselor or, like, a family counselor, imagine the world we would be in today.
Yeah. Well, and that's what the Winchesters is about. Mm-hmm. That's literally what it's about.
Gone before her time.
Literally. And when Dean went back into the past and was like, if you had the chance to change your fate, would you? Like, like, I thought about that in this moment. And Dean, he is like, I will make sure none of your family dies. Like, he is fucking dead set. Like, he's like, I will get your son back. We cut to Sam, and Sam's like, hey, like, we need to talk. And he's like, okay, so I read her diary, and there's not a lot in there, but it does say that she was pregnant and she was ashamed of it. And her dad...
Yeah. Because one of the things, too, is that, like, the daughter had died, like, a while ago.
Yeah.
So, like, at one point they had said, like, oh, like, if she's not a ghost, maybe she's still alive. And Sam was like, she would be, like, 50 years old.
Yeah,
There's no way that's her.
It can't be her.
So, yeah, so Sam is like, I think this is her daughter.
This is her daughter.
And Dean's like, we didn't know anything about a daughter. And he's like, well, I read her diary, and all she talks about is being pregnant and being ashamed of being pregnant.
Yeah, and she's pregnant and whatever. And then they talk about how the dad is like, oh, I'm gonna lock the baby up, whatever. And Dean's like, why would he do that? And Sam's like, girl. And Dean's like, oh, what the hell? And he's like, damn, humans really are monsters. Surprise, everyone.
So it's an incest baby.
It is an incest baby.
The dad raped his daughter. And now there's a...
Yeah.
And that's the villain, is the baby from that situation.
The baby is alive.
That's the villain in this episode. So that's the angle we're going with, guys. And it's going to be handled with so much tact.
Yeah. This also,
it's
like, so, and like, clearly she was locked up, and then she's the one who killed him. Which is also crazy, because it's like, she could get in and out of the house. It's not like she was being kept there after he died. I don't know. I guess she stayed because she was literally like a fucking wild animal. And she...
Don't call her a wild animal.
Well, they do in the show.
Well, no, I know, but I'm saying, like, we shouldn't.
Well, yeah. No, I mean, that she's, like, in the sense that I'm, like, when I said before, like, do we know if she could even read? Like, how could she, like, write words and stuff? Yeah, that's the crazy and fucked up thing, is there's nothing supernatural happening in this episode. It is just this poor girl who is the product of this horrible thing, who has been locked in this fucking house.
Yeah, and like I said, the boys handle it with the utmost tact. Yeah. And you would be surprised which one of them handles it with more tact, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Although, what does Dean say? So, this is where we were like, here's the metaphor. Because Dean is like, yeah, well, I don't really blame her for breaking out and trying to kill her father. And Sam goes, well, her life being hell isn't an excuse for murder. And Dean's like, well, like, you know what hell looks like.
Also, but then it's so funny because he says, oh, well, like, you know what hell looks like. And Sam's like, well, okay, I mean, that's not what I meant. But also, I'm sorry. I think it's okay that she murdered him.
I think it's
fine.
And
maybe I'm the bad person, but I'm, like, with Dean on this one. Like, yeah, it's good that she murdered this guy who was, like, literally holding her captive and was, like, a rapist. Like, he did that and also held her kidnapped and was also, like, the reason her mom killed herself. Like, I'm just saying, in this fictional world, I think that's okay.
No, and
I'm like, you guys have killed real people who have done, like, living people who have done, like...
less.
Objectively less bad things.
Like, Sam, you pick and choose, mama. You pick and choose. Mm-hmm. Also, if I were Dean and I survived hell, I would make those jokes all the time. I would be like, oh, so have you been there? I would absolutely do that. And then Dean is like, wait, okay. If he's been keeping her here all this time, he needed to be able to feed her. So I think I might have an idea of where she is and where we can find her. So clearly the metaphor in here is that Dean sees himself in her as a person who is turned into a monster by being trapped in literal hell. They ain't subtle. Much to unpack about the father character. Much to unpack. John Winchester, kill yourself challenge. We don't tend to allow suicide baiting on this podcast, but for John Winchester, every day, all day. So we cut to, they have like, it's like night vision camera, which is kind of confusing because it's like, we're not seeing this through a camera. They're just like filming it that way. But we cut to that because Danny, the boy, wakes up. He is tied up. He is below something in the house. And he's screaming. He's like, oh my God. Justified. And the girl crawls out of a hole in the wall, and she's like, hello. And he's like, oh my God. And she pulls out a gigantic New York City-sized rat. That is a big fucking rat. And she tries to feed it to him, and he's like, oh my God. And she starts to eat it in front of him. Like, it's pretty horrifying. And we cut to the boys. They're like, wait, I think I know where. I think I know where, like, to find her. In an earlier scene, when we just had the mom and the dad in the kitchen and they were talking about, like, farming and stuff, the dad had, like, opened a cabinet above where that old dumbwaiter was painted over, and it, like, smelled really bad. Just a fun thing. The boys break the hole in the wall where the dumbwaiter would have been, and you see this, like, little elevator chute, basically. And Brian, the father, is like, I'm gonna go down with you. And Dean is like, no, you need to live. I will make sure your son lives. No. And so Dean climbs down, and Sam's like, okay, can you get, like, curtains? We're gonna need a rope to, like, bring your son back up. And Dean finds a cross on the ground. He's like, what the fuck? We cut to Susan, the mom, and Katie, the daughter, in the shed. The window bursts in as the girl reaches in. And you're like, wait, didn't we just see the girl down in the dumbwaiter chute? What's going on? We cut back to Dean down in her little den. He's finding some of his guns down there, and he's like, oh my God, this girl's a klepto. And then he finds Danny, he cuts him free, and the kid goes, hurry, he's coming back. And he's like, he? And at this moment, I did think, he would never do this.
No, literally, I was like, oh my God, the way we both were like, this is just like he. If you don't know who he is,
listen to RuPaul's
I'm sorry. It's not going to make sense to you. It's too late. We're too lost in the sauce. But he is very special to us. And he's not like the God, like God in a way you would, this is not like Christian God. It's not he like that. He's kind of his own entity.
Yeah. But Dean says he, and Danny's like, her brother. And then a boy starts attacking Dean. You can barely see it because they're in the dark, and you're like, what?
Oh yeah, I did not see him this entire episode. Like, I was just like, I know it's happening because I hear the sounds, but
which I think some of might have been on purpose. Ollie's note here is really funny. There is no way a man who had been living on rat guts could be close to strong enough to hold his own against Dean Winchester.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say. I was like, the power scaling here, like, this is my power scaling, is that I'm like, a dude who has literally been locked in the walls with no sunshine or, like, real food other than raw forest and like, farm animals, and not even, like, actual, like, meat farm animals, like the rats and, like, squirrels and stuff. I'm sorry, Dean Winchester is, like, military trained, like, has been doing this his entire life. There's no way that this fight lasts more than a couple seconds. What?
Dean does die on a rusty nail. So... Rusty nail versus one trained hunter. Who will win? It was foreshadowing. Anyways, Dean sends Danny up to his father, and Sam's like, we gotta go. And it cuts back to Dean, who's still in this fight, and the brother literally gets on top of him, and Dean has his gun back, and he shoots him at, like, point blank, like, because he's literally on top of him, and the guy immediately dies. It's really sad.
Yeah, Dean also has this face where it's clear that he, like, feels bad about it. Like, it's like he kind of is like, yikes.
Yeah, because they're like, I'm really not in the business of killing people. Then we cut back to the girl is trying to break into the shed where the mother and the daughter are. And then we see Brian, the dad, kill her with, like, a shard of glass. We, like, hear it outside with, like, a shard of glass. And you can tell, like, he's very shaken by this. We cut to the boys. They're repacking.
But he was protecting his family.
And that's kind of
he was protecting his family.
That's kind of the irony, is that, like, you have, like, one dad who's horrible and then one who's, like, protecting his family. And then you have Dean in the middle. The boys are repacking their car, and they're trying to fix the wheels because their tires got slashed, and the family's thanking them, and they're like, are you guys okay? And the mom and the dad, who, if you remember, like, their marriage was on the rocks when they moved here, they're like, I think we're gonna be okay, like, if we're together. Like, clearly this has, like, brought them together, even though, like, she just lost her brother, like, they lost their son last year, whatever. Like, it's clearly they're, like, fucked up. We cut to the boys are under a bridge. We have to have our post-mission talk. The boys are under a bridge. They're eating some fast food. And Dean immediately is like, you know, I really felt for those kids. That is what torture will do to you. And Dean is like, well, you're not like them. They were barely human. Like, and they were, like...
Sam says that.
Yeah. And Dean's like, no, actually, I was worse because I enjoyed hurting the souls that I did. And he's like, no matter how many people I save, I don't think it can fill the hole inside of me. And why did I was like, oh my God, welcome back, Bobby from 911.
Stop. You cannot compare this very good Dean Winchester moment to Bobby from 911. Stop. Oh my God. No, because also I almost said something that's a huge spoiler for something Claudia wait, Claudia, take your headphones off for like 1 second. Spoiler for 911. Dead oldest son. This is just like the Buckley family. That was crazy. Anyway, Claudia, you can put your headphones back on. Can't wait for her to listen to this episode after she has finished 911.
I also have to just say, and maybe I'm a bad person, but other than the people who have, like, made a deal so that their soul goes to hell, most of the people's souls who are going to hell are bad people, according to the rules of hell. So I don't think Dean should feel so bad about torturing. I mean, it's still bad.
Dean's a special case. It's like, but it's like torture is bad. But at least it's not like he was torturing a bunch of innocent people. No, I don't believe in prisons. Like, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm failing
Angela
right now.
Davis, close your ears. But, like,
Angela Davis, I'm sorry.
According to the laws of this universe, the only people that are going to hell, it's not like The Good Place where we find out that, like, everybody's going to hell. It's not like that. According to the laws of this universe, the bad people are going to hell. And they have to be people worse than John Winchester, because John Winchester went to heaven.
Yeah.
Killing myself.
But I'm also, it's like, so it is like a really interesting episode of Dean being like, I enjoyed what I did because that's what hell made me and it turned me into that.
Yeah.
But I'm also gonna say, I really don't like how cool Sam was with being like, wow, fuck those weirdos who are children who were abused and locked away. Like, fuck them. They were so weird. Like, what is wrong with you?
It felt very out of character for him because he tends to be the one who is the more thoughtful one, or the more, like, let's have compassion for the monster one. And maybe this is, we're getting to soulless Sam slowly but surely. We will find out more about how he's a little fucked up in the head right now. But yeah, there's nothing supernatural in this fucking episode. It's literally just, there are some bitches trapped in a fucking house in the walls, Bruno style. And Dean's like, oh my God, they're just like me for real.
Yeah. And it's also just, I don't know. It's one of those things where every time Supernatural tries to do that, maybe the people are the monster. I'm like, I wish we were torturing, like, I wish the person who was actually the monster was, like, the dad, like, who fathered those children.
I mean, I think...
And put them in the wall. Like, I know that it's, like, implied, like, oh, it's just a tragedy. But I'm like, I really wish that there had been more than just, like, oh, he's a freak. You know? Like,
yeah.
We spent so much time talking about how these children who have been abused are, like, animals and are, like, less than people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we're not really that sad that they died. Like, we're not really spending all that time on being, like, it's really, like, I would have liked for them to mourn that loss of life a little more, because Sam's kind of like, oh, well, like, they were like animals, they didn't understand anything, and they murdered people, they were dangerous. And it's like, okay, maybe, but also they were victims, And I think that they
Like,
acknowledge that, but
yeah.
Dean is, like, the only one who's like, yeah, they were victims. Like, Sam
Yeah.
kind of doesn't give a fuck.
Also, speaking of carceral politics, at one point, the family, when they're having their last conversation with Dean and Sam, they're like, well, we can see why you guys don't deal with the police anymore, and why you guys don't fuck with the police. And Sam is like, you know, we have a what does he say? Like a touch and go relationship with them, whatever. And I'm
he's like we have like a complicated relationship or something like that,
like,
with the police.
And you're like, I know Dean would never say that. Dean says a cab. Like, girl. I just thought that was hilarious. But yeah, this episode, it's literally being like, what about if the monster was in your walls and was a human? Food for thought.
Ugh.
Society. But I do think that it's well done and that it's like Supernatural, like kind of like sometimes Supernatural tries to be like a police procedural, and this is definitely what's like trying to be like a more traditional slasher. I do like when Supernatural jumps out at like that. It can be crazy and fucked up for sure. Would you like to tell us about the next episode? Oh Lord.
I would love to get into this next episode. It is season 4, episode 12. We're finally getting places. This episode has a fun title, considering it has nothing to do with the actual episode. I mean, it kind of does, but it's like, it's just stupid. But I think it's a reference to like a line from an LA radio station. Like, I think they frequently use this phrase, which is Criss Angel is a douchebag. Yes, Criss Angel, the celebrity magician.
Which
that is who we're talking about. He is not in this episode. Criss Angel himself is not here or referenced.
He is referenced.
Oh, he is referenced for like 1 second.
Yeah,
but
like, and the one guy is clearly a reference to Criss Angel.
This is
but
more
then
of their
and he talks
more
about
of the,
him. But like,
yeah.
I cannot emphasize enough like how peak 2000s this is. Simply with the fact that like, you guys don't know how big Criss Angel was. Like, it's like, yeah, fuck it. Our celebrities are a magician who is a goth. Like, like, and when they make an episode about Criss Angel and it was relevant, yeah, it was. The 2000s were a lawless time.
You know what's crazy? Is that the same writer, I assume it's pronounced Julie Siege, Siege, she wrote It's the Great Pumpkin, Sam Winchester, which is an episode that we shit on so much.
Oh.
She is always writing some fuck-ass thing about magic. Girl, what are you talking about?
The monster at the end of this book, I feel like that's... Oh my god, she wrote that! The episode about the Supernatural convention!
Yeah, that feels about right. Oh god. Where
Wincest where there's Wincest shippers in it. Oh,
guys, isn't it fucked up that Wincest exists in universe, like in the Supernatural universe, and not like in the fandom, like in canon? Okay, anyway,
so fucking dark.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Are you ready to hear about this episode? Criss Angel is a douchebag.
I'm gonna say a comment later that is so fucking heinous.
Oh my god. So, this episode, we're in Sioux City, Iowa, and we see like a magician performing on the side of the road, and it pans up, and it is like, there's a banner that says, we're celebrating Magic Week. We're inside of, there's a bar, there's a bunch of magicians, and they're clearly identifiable as magicians because they're all wearing suits and top hats and magician outfits. There's an older gentleman sitting at the bar, and he's doing some card tricks with the bartender, who's a young woman, and she's kind of being impressed. And you can tell, like, he's fine at the card tricks, but he's not, like, doing anything special. And there's this other guy who's younger, who's, I'd say, maybe, like, mid-30s-ish, watching him do these tricks, and he goes, oh, boo, oh, great one, Jay, that's awesome. And, like, heckling this guy. And the girl who's with him, who we later find out is his assistant, is like, Vance, shut up. Like, leave him alone. And, like, stop being a jerk. And the older guy, Jay, is like, okay, like, whatever. He keeps doing this trick. And he's like, oh, this is your card. He does a little shuffle. And then it's like, oh, look, and now your card's, like, disappeared from the deck, right? And the bartender's like, oh my gosh, like, that's crazy. You got it. And then Vance, who's clearly had a couple to drink, walks over and is like, boo, look at his pocket. Here, check his pocket. And he reaches into his pocket and pulls out the card. And he's like, is this your card? And she's like, can you leave the old guy alone? And then it kind of cuts, like Jay is clearly a little dejected.
Also, this Vance guy, like, he's wearing, like, a little cape. Like, he's also pretty lame.
He's like Party City magician ass. Like not in a fun way. He looks like he got a Party City Dracula costume.
Like, it's just, I'm just like, step off, bitch.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. So we cut, and that's like the cold open. Then we have this like theatrical performance, right? It's like a magic act, and the guy who's doing it is clearly like a Criss Angel stand-in. Like, he has this eyeliner, he has an all-black costume, his hair's all spiky, and he's like, and now I will do this trick. Hey, the spotlight's supposed to follow me, and it's clear this is like a rehearsal. There's 3 old men sitting in the audience, one of which is Jay, and at the same time, they're all like, oh, what a douchebag. And one of them, we later find to be Charlie, is like, oh, this industry used to be about skill. And Jay is like, you know, this guy isn't a joke. We're the jokes. Like, we're sad and we're old and we're dying. Like, he's young. This is what people want. But he's like, we're dying. And Charlie and this other guy who is with them, Vernon, they're both like, what do you mean you're, like, we're dying? Like, we might be older, but, you know, we're not dying. And Jay says, you know what? I'm going to do the table of death tonight at my show. Last time I did it was 30 years ago, and I want to do it again today. And they're like, are you sure? Like, that's, like, really dangerous. And he's like, no, I'm going to do it. We then cut. He's at doing a stage show, and he's like, I am about to do a trick. It is not an illusion, but a display of daring and dexterity. I also want to add, he's probably about, like, in his late to mid, like, early to mid 60s. It's also a testament to how I'm like, wow, people looked so much older back then. Like,
yeah, they let people look old on TV, who were not, like, actively a dying character. Also, in the audience in this scene, like, there's not a lot of people there. Like, there's not a lot of people. Yeah, like, he's performing to a very, like, small crowd.
Yeah. So he climbs up onto this table, and his friend Charlie, who also, just so we know, has a distinct birthmark on his forehead. But Charlie walks over and closes these chains around his wrists. And Jay is like, oh, these chains are very tight, and as you can see, they're very real, like, to the audience. And Charlie is like, yeah, they are, like, really tight. Like, are you sure you're going to be able to slip out of these? Hence, showing the audience that the trick is just slipping out of them and moving. But we see, his other friend Vernon does a sign of the cross, like, in the wings of the show.
I gotta say, this little trio, they're hilarious. I love them.
Oh, I love them. So Charlie, who's his friend who's on stage, lights this, like, rope on fire with, like, a blowtorch. And we see that there's, like, it is attached and holding up this plank that has, like, 10 knives strapped to it that are going to drop directly onto the table that Jay is bound to. So we see Jay trying to escape the bindings, but it's not working. Like, he's not getting out. And we see, like, there's a countdown and, like, to the thing falling, and we get to the end of the countdown, and the plank of knives falls on him. And basically, he is behind a big sheet, as they used to do in, like, old-timey magician stuff. So you only see kind of his silhouette, but it falls on him, and everyone in the audience, like, gasps. And then he gets up and opens up the curtains and is totally fine, and he bows, and everyone's clapping, and we cut outside, And we see leaving a venue is Vance, the guy from earlier, walking down the street, and suddenly he, like, doubles over and falls to the ground, and we see these, like, wounds start to bleed out from clear, like, puncture wounds. And he dies. Crazy. So strange.
What could it be? Something supernatural?
Something super...
Who could say?
It couldn't be.
In a magic episode?
I don't know about that. So then we see this magician from earlier who was on the stage, who was being a real douche. His name is Jeb Dexter. But he's like...
Jeb is so... And now, of course, as soon as he said Dexter, I was like, Dexter Jester? He would never.
So true. He wouldn't do this. But we see him, and he's like, there's a crowd gathered around him, and he's doing like street magic, and he's like, no, I don't do tricks, but I engage with real feats of magic, and with demons and angels, and we kind of pan, and we see there is a camera filming him, so he's doing like street magic for real, like Criss Angel vibes. But the camera's filling him clearly for like a show or a movie or whatever. Probably a show. Probably not a movie. But is filming him for a show. And Sam and Dean walk up in suits. And Sam is like, oh, that's Jeb Dexter. And that's when Jeb is like, and like, I work with demons and do all this stuff. And Dean's like, oh, is he famous for being a douchebag? And then Jeb starts like convulsing and is like, get away, foul demons! I will fight you back. And then a bunch of cards like spew out of his hands, and he points at one that's stuck on a window and is like, is this your card? To a woman who's standing there. And like everyone starts clapping, and Dean's like, oh, I cannot believe that. That is so fucking embarrassing. But I can't believe like people fall for it, and I can't believe people are into that. And Sam was like, well, you know, all magic requires skill. And this is where we get in a great lore reveal about Sam Winchester. Because
so, like, between this and the clown thing, oh my god.
This and the clown thing and the fact that he did Our Town when he was doing theater
I
in
forgot
school.
About that.
We need to make a list of like random facts about Sam Winchester.
He has an LSAT score lower than Elle Woods. He was in Our Town. He had a brief magic phase. He hates clowns.
He got a sapphire Barbie for Christmas one year. But Dean is like, oh, I forgot that you were really into magic. You had like a wand and a cape and a hat. And Sam's like, it was a phase I went through when I was 13. Okay, leave me alone. And Dean kind of laughs at him, and he's like, well, you know, but like I do think that it's stupid to make light of this, like demons and like all that stuff when the real thing can kill you.
Dean is literally like, and why are you appropriating our culture? Like,
no, literally.
My culture is not a costume. I also think this is funny because Sam is, they're so against witchcraft and witches, but by the end of the show, Sam is just doing straight up witchcraft. I've talked about this before. And I'm like, oh, so you had a magic phase and now you're doing witchcraft with your best friend Rowena?
But Dean's like, oh, Dean is like, yeah, it's stupid, like, to make fun of this when the real thing can kill you. And Sam's like, oh, do you mean like a guy who gets 10 stab wounds without a tear in his shirt? So, clearly they're there to investigate what happened to Vance. We cut. They are talking to the woman from the bar who is Vance's assistant. And they are clearly masquerading as, like, FBI agents or the cops. I don't remember. Probably FBI. I think that's what they usually go for. And they're talking to her, and they're like, did he have any enemies? And she's, like, emptying out his bag, because she's clearly, like, cleaning his stuff up after his death. And it's kind of funny, because, like, she pulls out one of those, like, unending handkerchiefs, and then, like, she opens it, and she pulls out a rabbit.
No, because the rabbit thing was so dumb. I'm like, oh, so we're doing animal cruelty now? Because why is that rabbit just in a bag? Damn.
For real. But she opens it, she finds the rabbit, she's like, oh, hi. I'm like, who's feeding him?
Yeah. Poor guy.
So they ask if he had any enemies, and she's like, well, if I'm honest, like, this is a pretty serious game out here. And Vance, he would steal from other magicians. And Dean's like, well, what do you mean, like, steal? Like, steal what? And she's like, well, tricks, like, sleight of hand, like, anything up close. Like, he would take the tricks, like, learn the tricks that other magicians were doing and steal them. And, you know, maybe that would be enough to motivate someone to take action. And they're like, okay, this is a serious game here. So is there anything, did you find anything weird on his stuff? And she's like, yeah, actually, I found this. And she hands them a tarot card that is the 10 of Swords. And they're like, oh, well, is there a chance that this was his? And she's like, no, he hates card tricks. He never even carries them around, so this is definitely not his. Spooky.
They love to be like, oh, tarot cards, spooky on this show. So you're like, oh god, here we go.
Yeah. Meanwhile, every gay person within an 18-mile radius has one.
One?
Sorry.
Just one?
Yeah, well, within an 18-mile radius, you know.
Damn, got my ass.
Has one. I meant one deck. Come on. Give me a break. So we cut. We're at Jay's apartment, the older guy who did the trick. And his friend Charlie, who was there with him, the one with the birthmark, he says, he's like asking Jay, he's like, oh my god, like, how'd you do that? Like, that trick was crazy. I didn't think you were gonna make it. And Jay's like, well, a magician never gives away his tricks. And then he's like, here, watch this. And he's like, hold on, sorry, Mel just laughed. He's like, here, watch this. And he pulls out a deck of cards and he starts like doing a little trick and he pulls out 3 aces. And he's like, I've been like playing with cards like all my life. I've been trying to do card tricks and I've never been able to pull 3 aces all at once. And Charlie is like, well, you can never pull the ace of hearts, right? And Jay is like, well, you know what? I want to try the executioner tonight. And Charlie's like, what? Like, Houdini wouldn't try the executioner. That's ridiculous. Like, don't do that. You'll fucking die. And Jay's like, well, it's not luck or anything. It's skill. Like, I can do this. And Charlie's like, well, you know, no, like, this is ridiculous. And Jay's like, well, I either do this or, like, we end up being, like, old and washed up and playing birthday parties and bar mitzvahs. Like, I want to do something big. And Charlie's like, well, doing that and being washed up beats dying. I can't watch you kill yourself. I'm not gonna go.
He's like,
and Jay is like, yes, you will, because you're always there. And then
the gay vibe.
And then he gestures, and Charlie reaches into his pocket and pulls out the ace of hearts from the deck he was playing with before. And he's like, that was good. Okay, fine. I'll go to the show. That was the gayest scene. Like, what the hell? Like, that was, like, straight up. I was, like, waiting for them to have, like, some gay vibe and, like, to, like, lean in and have, like, a intimate moment. Like, what the fuck?
No.
It was, like, really, like, for real.
And the ace of hearts? Like, Old Man Yaoi alive and well in this episode of Supernatural. Like, it's so...
No, it was... and it was, like, the way that it's also, like, it's these men who just have always, like, you've come to every one of my shows. You've always been there for me.
You're like,
huh?
That's so interesting. You are giving shonen protagonist, he was my one and only friend.
No, that was literally what it was. They have a relationship very similar to Dean and Cass in a way.
I see them wherever I go. Dean and Cass.
There is Destiel everywhere for people who have eyes to see it.
There's a comment I will say later. No, because I... No, what were you gonna say?
No, never mind. I'll save it.
Anyway, I'll just say this. The gay vibe starts here, and it does not stop.
And, oh my god. So, we cut, and Jeb is there, the TV magician, is like, oh, this place sucks and it's dirty and like, I can't believe I came to this town for this stupid festival. Anyway, we can cut that, right? And he sits down at a table and he's sitting across from Jay and he's like, talks to the camera and he's like, yeah, now I'm gonna partake, like, I'm here to partake at this great festival to learn about local magicians, and like is cheesing it up, pretending he's not a huge asshole. And he's like, John here is gonna show me a trick. And he's like, it's Jay. And he's like, right. That's what I said.
He's like, we'll fix it in looping in post. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Damn.
So we cut, and Charlie is sitting kind of like watching this filming, and Vernon, who is the other old man who is doing the sign of the cross, is also there. And they're sitting watching this happen. And Dean walks up and he's like, hey, are you Vernon Haskell? I'm a federal agent. And Jeb then starts like having some issue, and all three of them are like, wow, he's such a douchebag. And then they look back and Dean's like, okay, yeah, sorry. Anyway, have you ever seen this tarot card before? And he shows him the Ten of Swords. He's like, I did some asking around. I found out you used to use them in your act. And Vernon's like, well, I haven't touched the deck in years. I'm not really doing a lot of performing right now. Dean's like, yeah, well, like, this was found on Vance's body. Do you know anything about that? Like, do you have any ideas about that? And Charlie is like, there's a guy down on Bleecker Street that sells cards like that. And Vernon's like, oh yeah, and he had beef with Vance that cost him about $50,000 in royalties. And they're like, oh yeah, you should go there and ask for Chief. Like, he'll be able to help you. He had crazy beef with he had crazy beef with Vance. You should go. And I heard the name Chief and was immediately like, oh God, please don't be racist. Like, I was so worried that this was gonna be like
bad,
something bad. It is bad, but it's not in that way. So we all cheered.
I swear to God, what is about to happen? You cannot have thought it.
It changed lives. So, but also another fun thing is that they're like, oh yeah, go to Bleecker Street, which is the street that Doctor Strange lives on in Marvel Comics. So I was like, oh, that's what he's up to now? So Dean goes down to the Sanctum Sanctorum. No, I'm just kidding.
I bet there's a fic with that.
An MCU Supernatural crossover. I have a feeling.
No, I mean like Dean and Doctor Strange fucking, especially considering it's Benedict.
No.
I'm gonna look it up.
Claudia, don't fucking look it up right now. We're recording an episode and I don't want to hear about it. We're boycotting the MCU until they remove that horrible devil from their movie.
That's true. Fuck them.
Fuck the MCU. Anyway, so Dean goes to this address and it's like a back alley and it's clearly like a basement entrance.
And also, they say like the address and then the number is like on a neon sign, and it's like it's like this noir ass fucking back alley, clearly a sound stage.
Yeah, like it's like a speakeasy sound stage.
And you're like, what is going on? Like, what has the show turned into? And you're like, okay.
So Dean like knocks on the door, and a guy answers and like looks at him, and he's like, "Hey, I'm here to talk to Chief." And he goes, "Oh, all right. Here, come on." And he opens the door and leads Dean down into this, like, basement. And you hear this really loud, like, house music blaring. And Dean's, like, looking around, like, what is going on? And he's like, oh, Chief will be right out. This guy walks away. Dean's standing by himself in this basement. And I want all of you to picture with me. I'm also watching this. And it's really, really bright out. So it's shining on my laptop screen. So I can barely see anything. But okay. We see a door open and bright lights come out, and you see this big, imposing man start to walk out of this door, and he's backlit, and there's like clearly like a smoke machine. And as he comes into focus, he is a leather daddy.
Happy Pride!
And he says, "You are really gonna get it tonight, big boy." And Dean looks at him realizes what's going on and says, there's been a misunderstanding. I think I've been had. And
first of all,
the guy says, you haven't been had until you've been had by the chief. And Dean says, Dean kind of goes to say something and then stops and looks him up and down and is like, oh, like doesn't say anything. And Chief pauses and goes, before we get started, what's your safe word? And Dean looks at him, looks away, kind of does like this little aborted gagging motion. And then we cut. And I'm like, I'm sorry. My first thought was, do we think that he... okay, no, never mind. I'm saving my thought for later.
No, because, yeah, I have receipts of what I think occurred there. I just have to say...
I have a theory. I have theories.
Number one, those old guys are the funniest people on the fucking planet. You guys...
No, this also solidified, because I'm like, how did they know that Chief was there unless they were gay? Because... it's established that they move around a lot. Like, this is not, like, where they really, like, they're here for this festival. I don't think they live here.
They're a bunch of old queens that know where, like, the Leather Daddy Dom Club is. Be fucking for real!
Happy Pride!
And they took one look at Dean. Not Dean and Sam. Just Dean! And went, you know where we should send this motherfucker?
Do you think that's why Dean is so embarrassed? Because he's like, oh my god, they fucking clocked me. My masculinity is in shambles.
And I bet, they thought it was going to be a joke between gay people. Little did they know it was a moment for Dean with Justin.
Okay, also, the fact that the show never... Okay, the show, I think because it's, like, playing off... If we look at it from a perspective of, like, okay, this is for comedy, for jokes, it's not really a big thing, is that they are doing this because Dean is, like, the macho man, and it's funny for the macho man to be gay. But I'm like, in universe, Sam is never in these kinds of situations.
Never.
But Dean is in situations like this multiple times. Like, this is not the last time Dean will be in a situation
Remember
like
the
this.
succubus?
I don't, if we start, okay guys, that's something, we will not elaborate on the succubus right now, but know that is coming, Lord. So you have something to look forward to if you want to keep listening to the podcast.
Lord is my witness when we get to that episode, that and Dr. Sexy.
Why did they do that? I don't, okay, but the point is that this has happened, and Dean is like, he says nothing for that last part of that interaction, and then we cut to Sam, and I'm like, I really don't give a fuck about what's happening with you right now, honestly. Except then Sam is in his motel room doing some research on his little laptop, and Ruby walks in, so I'm alright. I'm like, okay, I'm invested again. I'm back. You got me back in the saddle. And she's like, so, what are you doing? And Sam's like, well, you know, like, we're working a job right now. And she's like, oh, so you're working a job while 34 seals have been broken. So I guess Lilith's been breaking seals off screen.
I just love how in this scene Ruby is like, what the fuck have you been doing? It's like, it's not like he has any information or you've given him any help. She just walks in like a really bad manager. Like, and what have you been doing? Mm-hmm. And he's like, well, you didn't give me a task, so...
Yeah, like, I don't know what... Yeah. So she's like, oh, so, like, you've just been doing whatever the fuck. Like, you don't care. You've just been fucking around. And Sam is like, well, no, like, we do have a job. Like, we are working on something right now. And she's like, yeah, okay, so it's anything as important. Like, I'm pretty sure it's not as important as this. The Angels are, like, actively losing Sam. Someone has to do something. And he's like, oh, that someone is me. And she's like, yeah, it is. It's time. We need to go after Lilith and cut the head off of the snake. And she says that exactly.
Because she says that because Sam is like, how the fuck am I supposed to know what the seals are or how to break them or whatever? And she's like, go for the head of the snake, the person who's breaking the seals, dummy.
Yeah. But she's like, Sam, you're the only one who can do it. And he's like, I don't have a problem with the psychic thing. Like, I'm not concerned about that. But, like, it's the other thing that I don't think I'm ready for. And we have never heard him talk of the other thing. I think Klaudia and I have talked about it, but I'm going to be intentionally elusive now. Ruby's like, Sam, this is the only way. You have to do this. And Sam's like, no, I'm not going to. And Ruby's like, okay. You need to admit to yourself that you like it. You like how it makes you feel. It'll make it a lot easier when you do. And if you don't do this, like, oceans of people are gonna die. Like, a lot of fucking people are gonna die, and Lucifer is gonna rise up, and the apocalypse is gonna happen. So think about that.
I like how that also is a parallel to when Dean admitted that he's like, and when I started torturing people, I liked it. Because, because in the last episode, Dean was like, not only did I enjoy it, he's like, you know, because you come off the rack and you are finally able to inflict on someone else what you were given, and it feels good. And then they have like this inverted thing of her being like, you need to admit that it felt good. And you're like, but what felt good? Yeah. Well, and we know what it is pegging, but
stop. Sam, but here's the thing. I don't feel like Sam would be afraid to admit he likes being pegged.
Yeah.
I feel like he would be like, yeah, let's do it again.
Yeah, he'd be like, I'll let a beautiful woman peg me. I don't care.
I think he'd be excited about it.
That it's a demon that's the problem. It's not that it's pegging.
Yeah, he's a big advocate for pegging. So we cut. Sam is at like that same theater venue that they were at with Jay, like where Jay has been performing. They're there, and Sam is sort of looking wistfully, thinking about his conversation with Ruby. And then Dean walks up and he's like, oh, did you find anything? And Sam's like, no, not really. Did you? And Dean's like, not anything I want to talk about or think about ever again.
And here's
where my thought. Do you think that he had an evening with the chief and then was like, I can't tell Sam about this?
No, because
do you think he was like, I just can't say anything about it. I just need to keep it a secret?
No, because why would he say that if he had just been like, okay, misunderstanding and left? Would it just be about how like a man came on to him at a leather club? Like, or was it that he saw and experienced some things that he hasn't unpacked for himself yet and then said that? Like, why would he say that?
Because you think that Dean, well, because I think the explanation the writers would probably give is, well, he was embarrassed that it happened, like that even happened, like he's too macho for that to even happen to him. But it's like, well, if he's too macho, like, even in that case, if he was secure in his masculinity, he would have been like, these fucking assholes. Because you'd think also, like, he goes in very hot in this next scene. You'd think he would give Sam context to be like, these guys sent me to this situation.
Yeah.
They lied to me. But he doesn't say that to Sam. He's just like, anyway.
And you're like, if he had it and he's like, oh, I've seen things or whatever. And I'm like, all you saw was a man in some leather who was like, what's your safe word? Is seeing a gay person that bad? Damn. But also, I'm like,
Dean is homophobic. Not in like he's not homophobic in the way that's like, oh, he hates gay people. He's homophobic in the way that he's literally scared of them. Like, he's like, Sam, I saw something so scary. It was a gay man.
No, because he's like, the things I've seen, whatever, and you're like, you've been to hell. Like,
yeah.
Like, well, a leather club. Like, and I was like, So what you're telling me is that you went down into the club. Much to unpack, Dean Winchester. Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying. And then this next scene happens. We cut, and it's Charlie and Vernon, and they're talking, and Jay is, like, setting up his act, like, because he's doing the act called The Executioner, so he's, like, on stage doing stuff. And Charlie is like, he's fucking crazy. And Vernon is like, yeah, like, why would he be doing this? Like, he's gonna kill himself. This is ridiculous. And he's like, didn't you try to stop him? And Charlie's like, till I was blue in the face, I tried to stop him. But there was something in his eyes that just made me agree to this. And I'm like, okay, gay.
Homo.
First of all.
Like.
So then Dean and Sam walk up. And Dean is like, you know, we could have you arrested for obstruction of justice. And Charlie is like, oh, the chief not your type?
He got his ass.
No, so it's that, but there's also a moment where he and Dean, like, look at each other. And I'm like, that was like gay communication. Something was happening there. Like, I was talking about this today to someone, is how I'm like, when we watch this show, I do try to watch it from the perspective of, like, how does someone who thinks Dean is stone cold straight, like, how do they watch this? But I'm like, I cannot fathom a world where this is not happening. Like, something is here.
There's something odd here.
Something's quite queer. But they're like, we could have you arrested. Like, it's not funny. And Vernon is like, we know those badges are fake. Yeah, and Charlie's like, yeah, you spend your entire life doing, like, tricks and sleight of hand. You can recognize a fake badge. So we know you guys aren't actually, like, federal agents.
Dean and Sam are, like, their flabbers are fucking gasted by this. They're like, like, they don't have a backup for this or anything. And they're like, do we admit it? Do we not? And they're like, and Dean's like, we're aspiring musicians and magicians. And you're like, oh my God.
No, he's like, we're aspiring magicians. And Sam's like, yeah, we are. We're really looking into doing a show. It's something we're really interested in. And Dean's like, yeah, with like hoops and rings and rabbit and rings.
You're like, it's a brother act. And you're like, oh my God.
It's so good. But like, as they're about to sort of like interrogate this further, Jay takes the stage and he is like, I am going to do this feat of magic and dexterity. And the audience is much more full than it was that first night. And Sam and Dean are kind of watching like, oh, Jesus, okay, let's see this. And he gestures to the stage and we see that the executioner, like, it flies down and it's a noose. So he's basically gonna hang himself. But, we cut and we see Jeb, the Criss Angel stand-in, and he's like listening to this like really loud metal and he's getting ready to play a show. And we cut back to Jay and Charlie is putting him in a straitjacket and he's like, as you can see, this is a real straitjacket. I cannot access my hands. I have 1 minute to escape from this noose and 1 minute only. So we see he gets like stood up basically on these gallows with his head through the noose, tied up in a straitjacket, and this countdown starts. And then we cut back to Jeb's room and there's a rope. I guess he just has a noose hanging around, but a noose like starts to like go almost like a snake and floats up and loops around the fan and then ties itself around his neck. And we cut. Jay is kind of struggling to get out. Like, clearly he's not, again, a sheet was put in front of him so the audience sees his silhouette, but he is clearly not gonna get out on time. And Sam is like, Dean, I think this guy's like actually gonna fucking die. Like, this is not good. The countdown finishes. We see the gallows, like the floor go out, and we see Jay, the silhouette of him, basically get hanged. A couple seconds go by and nothing happens. And then he bursts out and is fine and takes a bow. And we cut and we see Jeb hanging from his ceiling fan dead. And Dean starts clapping. He's like, oh my God, Sam, that was really fucking cool. Like, holy shit. And Sam looks horrified and he's like, that was not possible. That he was not humanly possible. He should not have been able to do that. Which, I know Sam was obsessed with magic, but that seems a little presumptuous to say it's not humanly possible. Like, he's a magician, Sam.
Yeah.
Get a grip.
Like, they do all kinds of crazy shit all the time. Like.
Yeah. Like, sorry, Sam, that the idea that you have of magic isn't whimsical, but okay. Even though he's right. Hate to admit it. We cut. The boys are back in their motel room. Sam is doing some research, and he's like, Dean, like, these guys were really pretty popular, these three old guys. And Dean's like, oh, like, really? Like, what do you mean? How do you get popular as a magician? Like, how popular were they? And Sam's like, well, they were popular enough to play Radio City. And they go back and forth, and, the whole thing is that Sam's like, yeah, like, nothing happened. Like, they didn't stop being good at magic. They just got old and like aged out of it. And Dean's like, okay, like, do you think maybe they're using real magic to like make a comeback? And like that, Sam's like, yeah, that could be the case. Black magic has plenty. If it's like a death transference thing, like that's totally possible. And they kind of take a moment and Dean says, quote, I hope I die before I get old. Whole thing seems brutal, don't it? And I wrote down in my notes, I'm going to kill myself.
Literally, I had to pause it. I was like, let me supernatural writers. No, because he also says something in the scene of like, it's not going to end another way. And I'm like,
no, let me go through this. Let me go through this conversation. Let me go through this. Sam, so Dean says this. Sam is like, do you think we're going to like die young? And Dean says, or he's like, do you think we're going to die young? Like, do you think we're going to get old and like be doing this when we're 60? And Dean's like, I think we're going to be long dead before we're that old. I mean, think about it. Like, what do you imagine we're going to be like older hunters? Like, that just doesn't happen in this line of work. And Sam's like, well, that's not true. And he was like, yeah, what are we going to be like? Travis? Gordon, who also, I was like, Gordon's
not that old.
Not that old. But he's like, Travis and Gordon? And Sam's like, well, what about Bobby? And Dean's like, yeah, well, Bobby's like the spectacle of what you want to be when you grow up. And I was like, fuck you, Dean. Why is Bobby catching strays right now?
Because Bobby speaks multiple languages. He owns a home and a business. He has normal fucking friends. And like, he's a little depressed, whatever. But I'm like, Bobby has his shit together. You live from motel to motel.
Mm-hmm. Don't come for
Freak.
Bobby.
Your dad also lived a pretty long time hunting, going from place to place. He lived a pretty long time. Like, maybe you're just dumb. But
I don't think that John is a good example.
No, I'm just saying, and like, that people do make it that long.
Yeah. But he says, Sammy, it ends bloody or sad. That's just the life. Sam closes his laptop and he asks Dean, he's like, what if there was a way for us to just end everything? Cut the head off the snake. Which is just exact same thing Ruby said. And Dean's like, well, that would be great, but it's not possible because, like, there are so many different things in this fight. Like, it's not just like, oh, there's a demon. It's like, oh, there's a million other monsters. Like, it's not just going to end one day. There's not one thing you can do to make it all stop. And Sam's like, yeah, you're right. And Dean is like, okay, can you track down Jay? I'm going to look for where the tarot card came from. I'm going to see if I can track it down. And that's the end of that scene.
Conversation. I know Chuck was gagged writing this. I know he was.
This makes me so angry about how the show ended. Like, it makes me sick. Dean having this whole thing about it ends, we are always going to die young and bloody and sad. And then that being exactly what happens instead of being like, you know, the whole show's about like, oh, we have free will and we're doing our own thing. And the whole thing is literally like, if you don't get free will, fight God.
And then this still
happens to Dean.
And they do fight God and they do end it all, but then they still like... Also him being like, oh, what if we cut off the head of the snake? I'm like, again, that only works for demons. Like, not everything else. It's so angry. It's like... It's so... Okay, this is the first time. I'm going to say, I'm only going to do this twice. It's a lot. This is what the experience of rereading the Jujutsu Kaisen manga is like right now as I go back and there are little things that are foreshadowing and I'm like, you are diabolical. You are, but in Supernatural, like Supernatural is badly written, so it wasn't on purpose. It was on purpose only at the end, and it's just like, it's so diabolical because you're like, wait, if you meant for the nihilist ending the whole time, girl, and in this case, they didn't mean for the nihilist ending because it went through like 6 different showrunners, and you're like, it makes it worse. Like it makes it worse. I'm like, what if I jump?
This is the kind of conversation, because I know we say a lot, like, oh, it's hard to rewatch Supernatural when you know how it ends, and that is true, but, like, it's especially hard, and it's, like, there's that because it's, like, oh my god, like, with the whole, like, Destiel canon, past confession, whatever, like, that is true, and it's weird to watch those scenes back, but it's conversations like this that I'm like, this is the thing that is the most upsetting when you rewatch Supernatural knowing how it ends, because it's, like, they do all this stuff to be like, yes, you can subvert fate, and, like, that's the moral of the show, is, like, you don't have a fate, you get to choose what you want to do, and if it was, like, that was the point, was to show that it's all pointless, it's like, okay, whatever, like, it's just badly written, but it's like, no, the whole point of the show is to say, like, you can be what you want to be, you just need to have initiative, like, you just need to fight for your free will, and then it ends the way it does. Like, it just doesn't make sense, and it's poorly written, and it's like, this kind of conversation happens a lot in this show. I think this one is the most clear.
Yeah. Also,
at least that we've seen so far.
The fact that Sam is the one who does get to, like, grow old, and he doesn't, it's implied that, I don't think it's implied that, like, he keeps hunting, like.
No, I don't think so.
Like, and then, oh god, I just thought about Sam's fuck-ass wig.
It's just not anything. It's just not well done, and it actively undermines the entire rest of the show. Like, I can't sit here and enjoy this knowing what happens.
It's so, I mean, I swear to you, the feeling of watching the second to last episode and then the last episode of Supernatural is what this feels like every time this conversation comes up. You're like, oh my god. Like, it's so, what if I ended it all?
So, if we keep talking about it, we will never stop.
Yeah.
But we cut to, like, a hotel. Dean is standing there, and Sam walks in. It's clearly, like, the next day. Or, like, later that day. I don't know. But Dean is like, oh, yeah, Jeb fucking died. We found, like, I was able to, like, sneak in, and I found this on his body. And it's the tarot card, the Hanged Man, which is ironic because he died. So they're like, okay, like, this is a pattern. Clearly this is a death transference because, you know, the executioner was Jay hanging himself, and then he lived, and now he dies from being hanged. So clearly something, like, it's death transference. And the cards are, like, the target. And they're kind of being like, okay, well, like, what's the connection? And Dean's like, well, I did some digging. Jeb was being a huge asshole to Jay yesterday at that filming, and I found out that Vance had been harassing him and, like, being really shitty to him. Not harassing, heckling him at that bar. Like, they have figured out, like, okay, both of these targets were jerks to this guy. And Dean is like, okay, so did you figure out, like, did you manage to trail him? And Sam's like, well, he got away. He managed to give me the slip. And Dean's like, how'd he give you the slip? He's 60. What are you talking about? And he's like, well, we know where he lives. So they go into Jay's apartment.
He's like, well, he's a musician. He's a musician. He's a magician, Dean. Like, yeah. Which I think is really funny.
So they walk up fully, like, in the hallway of his apartment with their guns out. And they kick down the door. And they point their guns at Jay, who's like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, he raises his hands. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And they're like, oh, you're using real magic to try to make a comeback. And you've been planning these tarot cards. And it's real, right? It's black magic. How'd you learn it? And Jay's like, genuinely, I have no idea what you're talking about. Magic is not real. Like, I have not done anything. Magic, it's all sleight of hand. It's not real. And they're like, oh, well, what happens, you know, now that Jeb gets hanged and then you hang but you live? Like, what's going on with that? And he is genuinely shocked to hear that something happened to Jeb. And he's like, oh my god, like, I had no idea. Listen, I'll give you whatever you want. Just please let me go. And Sam and Dean look at each other, and Dean's like, something's not right. Something's fishy. Normally they'd be hurling, I think Sam says, normally they'd be hurling dark hoodoo at us by now.
Like, what the fuck?
Come on, guys. So they look at each other, and then we cut, and Jay is, like, tied to a chair, and Sam and Dean are, like, talking to each other, and they're kind of off to the side, being like, okay, well, what do we do? Like, clearly he doesn't know what's going on. Something is up, so we need another plan. And they both turn back to look at Jay, and he's gone, because he's a magician. He can escape some rope. He's not a fucking bitch. They are like, oh my god, we need to find him. So they run out.
And they're also like, yeah, I should have seen that one coming.
They, like, race out the door to try to run down the hall to find him. Jay pops open the closet and he was hiding there the whole time. Hiding in the closet?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it shows. Sam and Dean run downstairs, and Dean's like, how could he outrun us? Like, he's 60. This is crazy. There's no way he was faster than us. So maybe he's, like, hiding or something. And Sam's like, okay, like, we just need to look. And then we see the cops outside, and they pull up. This is the fastest police response time ever, I swear to God. But the police walk in.
It's giving Athena, honestly. Always first on the scene.
Jay comes down the stairs and he's like, it's them. They were the ones who tied me up and attacked me. And the police run in and Sam and Dean are like, oh, fuck. So they raise their hands, put their hands up, and get arrested.
Which is hilarious because according to the government, they are dead.
Yeah. We cut and it's backstage at one of the shows. And Jay is talking to Charlie, and he's like, yeah, and they said I was doing real magic and, like, all this stuff. I don't know. It was crazy. They're crazy. And Charlie's like, yeah, you're right. They're crazy. You're lucky to be alive. Like, they could have killed you. And Jay is kind of like, yeah, but I don't know, with Jeb dying like that and with Vance, like, I don't know. And Charlie's like, wait. Are you saying that you believe them? And he's like, I don't know. I mean, no. Maybe. I don't know. But I don't think I should go on. Because, like, clearly when what if it's true? What if I do this and people die? And Charlie's like, Jay, no, like, you have to go on. Like, there's people out there, they want to see you. And Jay is like, Charlie, when I did the table of death, I was going to kill myself. Like, I was prepared to die. And I didn't plan on making it out. I didn't make it out. I have no idea how I survived that. And Charlie says, well, regardless, you did survive. And you were incredible. When you were in your prime, you were incredible, and you have that back. You need to keep going. You have to do this. You can do this, okay? And again, very homoerotic conversation.
It's so, like, Charlie is like, I believe, like, it's so, like, they are two old queens. Like, what is going on here?
So Jay agrees. He's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. We see that Charlie is setting up, it's the table of death again. Vernon is looking on from the wings. They do the same shtick. Charlie walks off past Vernon. So, like, is off stage. And the same thing happens. The plank falls. And Jay comes out. He's totally fine. Everyone's clapping. We hear, like, a scream. And we hear somebody say, oh my gosh, like, call 911 from backstage. And they all rush out. And Charlie has been stabbed in the same way that Vance was stabbed. So this transference happened to him. And it's funny because it's like, oh, it's the same way Vance died. But the wounds were clearly different. So I guess they arranged the knives differently.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Charlie has been killed. We cut, Jay is sitting in, like, the waiting room of a hospital. And Sam and Dean run in. And Dean is like, oh my gosh, like, we wanted to thank you for dropping the charges. What changed? And he's like, we need to talk. And it cuts, they're having this conversation. And he's like, you know, I was just a kid when I met Charlie. He saved my life. I mean, I was just like a hustler. Like, I was trying to do magic. And it got me in more scrapes than anything else, and he got me out of all of them. He was more than my friend. He was my brother.
You're like,
which was like, okay, they're brothers in the same way that Dean and Cass are brothers, okay?
Yeah, remember when Jensen Ackles was like, yeah, you're like brothers?
Yeah, that's literally the exact thought I had.
Because I think when he said that, I think millions of people were like, I'm going to kill you with hammers.
No, literally.
They're just like brothers. Okay. Sure.
But So Sam is like, okay, you might not want to hear this, but clearly it was someone close to you who's doing this. Like, they like you. They want you to succeed. They are doing these shows and taking out people that you were having issues with. And he's like, but I didn't have an issue with Charlie. Like, I don't know why that would happen. And Sam is like, what about Vernon? Like, did they ever butt heads? And Jay's like, it would not be Vernon. Vernon couldn't do that. We were all really good friends. Like, yes, he and Charlie disagreed sometimes, but he wouldn't do this. There's no way. And Dean says, Dean's like, it's like crack. People do surprising things once they get a taste of it.
This is foreshadowing for later for Sam Winchester.
Sam does make a little face at this, which we'll find out the answer to, not in this episode, but later. And Jay is like, well, you'd better be right about this. We cut. Vernon is just so grandpa. He's sitting at his house and he answers his landline and he goes, yep. Oh, great. Okay, I had some things I wanted to go over with you too. I'll be right over. So he leaves, assuming, one can assume that Jay has called him. He leaves, and as he exits, Sam and Dean break into the apartment, and Dean's like, oh my god, there's not as much stuff in here as I thought there would be. And Sam is like, yeah, well, he's a touring magician. Like, he probably everything he's ever owned is in here. Like, he probably is a light traveler. We cut. They're at the theater. Vernon walks up, and he's like, I just got off the line with the promoter. The headlining gig is yours. And Jay is like, I don't think I can do it. Charlie's dead. Like, I'm not going to do this gig. And Vernon's like, but this is your shot. This is our shot. This is what Charlie would have wanted. And Jay's like, oh, it's what Charlie would have wanted. This is what, and this is why, we've been having all these people die around us. This is why Charlie's dead. And Vernon is like, you're crazy. What? Oh, you're losing it for real. And Jay kind of accuses him of doing black magic. And Vernon's like, okay, girl, for real, you are fucking crazy. And as they are getting close, it starts getting more heated. You hear a man, and he says, you shouldn't be so hard on him, considering he didn't do it. We cut. Sam and Dean are looking through Vernon's stuff, and they can't find, anything special. But they do find a poster from a while ago advertising, a performance, a magic performance of this young man who has a birthmark. And it's the same as Charlie's. And then we cut back to the theater, and we see that same birthmark on this very young man who's probably in his late 20s. I think it's revealed he's in his late 20s. But Jay and Vernon look, and they're like, oh my god, Charlie? What is going on? How old are, what? How are you so young? How old are you? And he's like, well, I'm 28. But I've been around long enough to, quote, to have shilled for Barnum, quote. And he's like, yeah, P.T. Barnum gave me this grimoire of magic, real magic, that works. And I thought it was crazy. I thought it was some novelty, but it works. And yeah, I killed Jeb and Dexter because I wanted to give you a gift, Jay. I saved your life. You were ready to kill yourself. And Vernon's like, oh, is that true? Jay, you were going to do that? And Charlie is like, I want you to be immortal with me. There's a spell for immortality. That's what I've done. I want you to do this with me. I want both of you to do this with me. And Vernon is clearly thinking about it. He's kind of nodding along. And Jay is like, no, because who has to die for us to be immortal? For us to be young again?
Sick Full Metal Alchemist reference.
He said equivalent
exchange, mama.
Me when equivalent exchange has existed outside of Full Metal Alchemist.
I know. It's just that I have to say it. That's the thing. It's just, like, I have to say it. Also, so it is the superior show about two brothers fighting God. So
they're like, but he's like, I want to be like immortal with you, both of you.
Yeah, it's
and but he's like, no, like this is ridiculous. Like people will die. It's not right. And then Sam and Dean burst in and they go up and they're like, stop it. He's not gonna stop. He's a monster, blah, blah, blah. Like, he's the magic user. Guys, get away from him. And as they walk up, a noose wraps itself around Dean, like Dean's neck, and pulls him up. And then Sam pulls out his gun and shoots Charlie, and then Charlie starts, like, chewing and spits out the bullet. And he's like, yeah, that was a good little trick there, right? And then he turns invisible and is, like, teleporting all around the room. And Sam is trying to chase him, but then he pushes him down with magic onto the table of death. And it looks like he goes to cut the rope that's holding the thing that has the knives on it up. So that's falling. Dean is getting strangled. And Jay is like, stop this. Don't do this. And he's like, ha ha ha, I'm gonna do it. And then we see Charlie, like, double over with pain. And this blossom of blood starts coming out of his tummy. And we realize that Jay has stabbed himself. And he pulls out the knife and there's no blood. And Charlie's like, what? Like, he's confused. And Jay holds up the tarot deck. And Charlie, out of his pocket, pulls out a card. He did the same trick when he put the Ace of Hearts in his pocket. And he says, you would choose these strangers over me? And then he falls to the ground, and you see that the tarot card he is holding is the Magician.
I was gagged by that. Like, he ate it up. Like,
oh no,
also,
it was so. I was like so invested in these old gays. I was like,
no,
oh my god, like
no. And here's the thing, like, I'm really invested in Charlie being like, I have almost unlimited power from this fucking grimoire that P.T. Barnum gave me. Crazy thing to put in the lore here.
Well, I mean, it is the greatest show. It's everything you ever want. It's everything you ever need, and it's there right in front of you.
No, but here's the thing. If he has...
What if they become a Greatest Showman podcast?
No, but, like, he has all this power, and he chooses to spend his immortal life being a magician on the road with this other man.
Other two men.
Like, he could do anything. He could do anything.
Vernon... They literally are, like, Team Free Will. Like, they are Sam, Dean, and Cass in the way that Vernon is, like, Sam, because he's like, oh, these guys are, like, have some vibes going on, and I'm just kind of here.
Wait. They kind of are. Wait.
This is their future. It's just, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know why this... And it's crazy because it doesn't end here, but I'm also like, oh my god, the Ace of Hearts... Like, I don't know why that Ace of Hearts, like, made me so emotional. Like, what is going on? Happy Pride? Question mark?
No, it was literally like, oh, the tragic gays! Like, it was crazy. Like...
Oh my god. So, we cut to the saddest scene ever. We see Jay, and he's sitting at that same bar... And he's just, like, kind of shuffling his cards back and forth slowly. And you see he kind of, like, fudges them. And, like, they kind of go everywhere. Like, he's not being very dexterous. And Dean and Sam walk in. And they thank him, like, for saving them. And for doing that. But he's like, well, like, you're thanking me for killing my best friend? And they're like, well... You know, you saved us. Where's Vernon? And he's like, oh, well, Vernon left because he didn't want to speak to me after what I'd done to Charlie. And Dean is like, well, you did the right thing because he wasn't going to stop. Like, you know that he would keep killing people to live forever. Like, that's what would have happened. And Jay's like, well, he was like my brother. And now he's dead because I did the right thing. And the camera pans very specifically to Dean, who looks like he's having some very conflicted feelings. And Jay says, he offered me a gift, and I threw it back in his face. And now I have to live the rest of my life old and alone. He stands up to leave. And the waitress from earlier is like, oh, hey, you forgot your cards. And he looks at her and he says, throw them away. He walks out. Dean looks at Sam. They have a little second and he goes, I really need a drink. And Sam says, I'm going to go for a walk. He goes out for a walk. He goes outside. We see him walking down the street. He gets into a car and Ruby is driving. And he's like, okay, I'm ready. I'm in. And they drive off. And that's the end of the episode.
Considering that the show ends with Sam growing old alone. What the fuck? What the fuck? This episode, the old man Yaoi, first of all, and then this? Much to unpack. What is going on? What is going on in the House of Commons?
The old man Yaoi fandom is in shambles.
The old man Magician Yaoi. We're gonna have to call the episode that.
Oh, like, we have two great titles. You'll already know, listener. You'll already know which one we picked. But it's just so good. Like, it's also like, I don't know. Sometimes these one-off episodes are like, not necessarily one-offs, but like sometimes these kind of like filler episodes are a little bit like, they can be kind of silly and it's like, oh, it'll have meaning, but like, I feel like I always have trouble getting invested in these characters and like, not that I have like, that I don't like think they're entertaining or I don't find them interesting, but I was like really invested in these guys.
Also, I love the like, cocoon joke. They did make a cocoon joke where they're like,
oh my god, I forgot about that.
Dean is like, all right, sorry to interrupt this cocoon shit. And I was like, that was good.
Oh, doesn't he say like, he's like, I'm not Gutenberg and this isn't Cocoon?
And I was like, what? The way this man speaks.
Yeah. I'm also like, why is Criss Angel catching strays in the title though?
He's like, it's so... The Criss Angel episode being about Old Man Yaoi, light work for an episode of Supernatural.
I loved this, and I loved how it reflected, like, it reflects sort of... I don't love it. I hate it. I hate how it reflects what happens later in Supernatural and where this story goes, and it makes me feel violently angry.
Like, in a way that...
But, like, it's like, this was, like, when the show had promised to be good. Like, I can imagine rewatching this conversation if we had gotten a world where Dean had gotten to grow old, and, like, how fulfilling this would feel to be like, yes, you pissed in the face of fate, and won, you did this.
Like watching the second to last episode felt.
Guys, I think maybe the point is, if you watch Supernatural, just don't watch the last episode. Just watch the second to last one and turn it off.
Yeah, just like watch the second to last one, and then there's just like one fanfic that I remember reading after November 5th, 2020 that like healed me, and I gotta remember what it was called, and then like that's canon.
Send it to me, show it to me, Rachel.
Yeah,
is that it?
What a mix of episodes that was.
Oh, what a mix.
Well, we'd like to thank you for listening to this extremely cursed Supernatural recap. For more cursed Supernatural content, updates on, our episodes, all that kind of stuff, you can follow us on social media at Mystery Spotcast on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Tumblr. Yes, we're still on Twitter. Sorry. You can also ask us cursed Supernatural questions in our Tumblr Ask Box or by emailing us at themysteryspotcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed listening to us suffer, have brief moments of insanity, please rate the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere where you can leave a rating. And also leave a comment on our YouTube channel that we have. That would be really helpful. And also tell a friend about the show. They don't have to know anything about Supernatural because we're here to guide them. Now that we have reached season 4, we are backsliding back into Destiel. So if you have any fic recommendations, we have a form in our show notes. This is just for us to read. It's not like we're going to talk about the show. This is for us. But if you have any, you can send it along. If you want to hear more from us, we're also the co-hosts of RuPaul's Pod Race, a queer Star Wars podcast, where we are back weekly covering The Acolyte. It's really fun. And see you 2 Tuesdays from now for more slaying people, queer baiting things, the supernatural business.